Hey guys, I hope everybody is doing well. I have a unique and kind of interesting presentation prepared. It's something that I really enjoy, which is the concept of anti design. Anti-design is a visual concept. It refers to any piece of design media that purposefully rejects the laws of UX and graphic design. In many ways, anti-design is a nebulous concept, and it has no proper definition, but its theology is that anti-design is any digital piece that is purposefully crafted to represent what the alternative vibe, trend, or lifestyle that the artist or the designer might identify with. Typically practiced in web and graphic design, anti-design often uses harsh colors, text, graphics, 3D models, and experimental data hierarchy as a way to create products that grabs the viewer's attention. Some people may consider them to be illegible or even unpleasant to look at, but this is what anti-design exactly is. It is a bold statement that says that this piece comes from someone who's not afraid to do things out of the ordinary. They pride themselves in the fact that they can push boundaries. The term anti design actually comes from an architectural movement that emerged in Italy during the 1960s. The anti design movement then sought to harness the power of design to create objects and living quarters that were unique rather than embracing style, mass production, and consumerism. The common trend at the time was modernism, which followed the idea of simplicity and utility. In contrast, anti designer rebels felt objects should be temporary and quick to throw away and be replaced by something new and more functional. Anti designers wanted people to think about the objects they were buying, even if they were ultimately going to be thrown away. The modernist palette at the time was generally black, white, and grays. Simplicity and materials were chosen for their durability. As you can tell from the pictures, anti designers explored the rich variety of colors, distortion, and materials to express themselves and the movement. In digital design, anti design is also referred to as brutalism sometimes, which is also ironically another architectural movement born in the 1950s but in the United Kingdom. Brutalist buildings are characterized by minimalist constructions that showcase the bare building materials and structural elements over decorative design. This style is commonly made up of exposed unpainted concrete or brick, angular geometric shapes, and a predominantly monochrome color palette, and other materials such as steel, timber, and glass are also featured. These terms have an attachment to the present anti design movement in the fact that they both took an unconventional approach to challenge the popular trends of their time. But the older anti design movement was more about experimenting with color and form and proportion, whereas the brutalist movement was more about humility and appreciating the building materials themselves. Thus, traditionalists generally lean towards anti design as the correct term for this design practice in the slide, but both are valid in the alternative design community. And let's be honest, there's something so cool about calling a design trend brutalist. To understand how anti design came into being, it's important to look at a brief history of web design itself. So, the first generation of web design kind of looked like this. Oh, I think somebody's in the meeting. I'm just going to quickly add them in. So, just to recap, we are looking at the history of UI design. And the first generation of websites were designed to look good only on text only terminals, black and white monitors, and low resolution color displays. This is the landing page of InfoCern, one of the first websites in the world. Created in 1991 using HTML only, it was made to inform the world about the Worldwide Project, which is the inception of the internet. So years a couple of years down the line, Netscape released extensions to HTML that allowed for some graphical and structural implementation. The websites of that time also followed the homepage model, where the landing page was decorated with icons, 3D buttons, windows, and pictures. Sometimes sound files were also loaded in as well. Even though HTML at the time mostly supported table layouts, it still lacked user friendly structural capabilities. So, one of the cool things that designers would do at the time in order to create empty space, as the one you see between the number and the black space over here, is that they would use small transparent GIF images placed between content. These were also called spacer GIFs. By the late 90s, not only was CSS2 version implemented across platforms, Flash was also a major part of web design. It offered streamlined system for creating interactive and graphic websites and allowed for animation, custom fonts, 3D effects, which was a huge step up from just HTML. Due to these complex capabilities, splash pages or landing pages became more popular. At the time, it was a way to make a strong impression by displaying a cacophony of visual excess, sort of like digital peacocking. By the end of 1990s, web design 2.0 was in full bloom, but creating an individual website was still a demanding process for a common person. MySpace gave an opportunity to everybody to have a page of their own, which led to its massive popularity. Because of its ease of use, MySpace allowed its users to design profiles however as they wished, which often led to visually packed and stunning pages, like the one in the example here, which is a very typical example of the MySpace profile from that time. At the same time, designers also started paying attention to the user experience of things, organizing data meaningfully with less visual load and rounded corners broke into the mainstream web design language. By the end of 2009, there was an increase of smartphone usage, and flat design, as the one in the picture here, became more common, and it was much easier to implement across the varying screen sizes and browser constraints. These simplified designs solved many of the problems with design processes and slow loading browsers. From there on, minimalist designs were adopted onto many corporate and marketing type of institutions, and we still see remnants of it in our present. But somewhere along the way, there always is, as there always is with creative ventures, the design community noticed a formation of products that were made in a way that were completely opposite of such corporate US practices. Though it is hard to track when exactly anti-design came into being, we know that it takes a lot of visual inspiration from the 1990s and early 2000s website and media trends. It's almost as if it's like a roided up version of all the crappy parts of the 1990s and the 2000s web design trends. In its upcoming days, web design was so in its upcoming days, web design was all about pushing the boundaries with the novel and limited tools you had at the moment. In parallel, the late 90s and the 2000s was also about freedom of the body and expressing oneself no matter who or where you were. And the birth of the internet played a huge part in this. This was the period of pushing creativity as people were exposed to a whole different medium. And even though past trends have a tendency to come up in the future, no period other than the early 2000s, with all of its facets, has gained this much attention in our present. This visual language is still prevalent in our present mediums. Some of us might even be familiar with them, such as Y2K TikTok trends and fashion trends. Many alternative design artists also use these elements from the past and stitch it together with the technology of today to create completely new design language. And here is a better example that explains my point. Here we have two websites. One was made in 2002 and the other was made in 2018. The website on the left is Argnet, an old Dutch shopping catalog, and on the right is a Swift designer's portfolio. While both the designs have purpose to them and are visually similar, the intent and the technology behind it is vastly different. One is made for functionality and the other is an advertisement of the designer's brand and skill sets. So there is no real way of knowing where anti-design is headed to. Maybe in the future, elements of it will become fully mainstream, and more white collar institutions might adopt them into their common branding, or it may be completely taken over by an even more elaborate trend. But one thing is for certain, regardless of time, concept of creating wacky and unorthodox products will always prevail, and with that, anti-design may never really die. Thank you for listening.